Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It is so good to see you. I am going to be doing a review of all of the books that I read in 2022, whether good or bad. If you don't know what GoodReads is, it is this app that you can use to look at reviews of books, find books that you might be interested in, and you can also track your progress of reading. And that is what I did, thanks to my friend Blue, shout out to you. This year I read 30 books. That is a major accomplishment for me, especially because the year before I probably only read like 3 or 4 books. I'm gonna be keeping this really short because there's 30 that I need to get through, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember characters' names or anything like that. Let's go through them. First book I read last year was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This book was aesthetically pleasing to read, snowy, small college, and then the way that it all unraveled was just like perfectly done. Hi Misty, come here. You want to see? Look at that dog. Next up, I read What Color is Your Parachute 2022, Your Guide to a Lifetime of Meaningful Work and Career Success. This is a workbook that my dad got me. He raves about this book. There's a new edition every year, and it's a workbook so you can figure out what career path is right for you. Personally, that didn't really work for me, but I'm sure for other people it might be really helpful. Next up, I read a self-help book, You Are a Badass, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life by Jen Sincero. It's a short little self-help book, borderlines on manifestation. Next up, I read The Lying Life of Adults by Elena Ferrante. I did not like this book. Honestly, it just made me super uncomfortable, especially the ending. I'm surprised I made it all the way through. There wasn't really any plot. It was just the story of this girl growing up in Italy. Okay, this is when I got into A Court of Thorns and Roses and Sarah J. Maas. So I read the first book, Court of Thorns and Roses, then I read A Court of Mist and Fury, and then I read A Court of Wings and Ruin. There's this girl, she is like a hunter, she hunts this wolf, and then she tracked like this fairy realm because she's a wolf, and that was a fairy person, and that was the right person, and she's trapped, so really do these kind of things, where she's trapped, of course she has nice clothes, and she's living in this mansion, and of course there are servants waiting on him. Then there's like this romance with the main character, which I didn't like, and then once you get into it, you realize that was on purpose. And that's something that I like about it, because it's a journey. You know, it's not like cut and dry. I did not know books were allowed to be that spicy. Not to say I didn't like it, like, I was shocked. I was shocked. That was my first time reading that level of spiciness. Next up, I read Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I was recommended this book by a friend, and I sadly did not enjoy it. I thought the writing was kind of immature. I love a good dystopian novel, but I just did not think it pulled it off. The stakes were high, and then, oh, everything's fine. Like, what? Next up, I read American Born Chinese by Jean Luen Yang. This is a short graphic novel, and the reason why I read this is because I actually was in this series. It was my first background gig back in May. They're basically like 3 unrelated tales that all relate to the same kind of theme of not fitting in as a Chinese American. It was a little short for my taste, and I kind of wanted to see more. I'm curious to see how they pull off the TV series. I'm not sure if there's a release date for that yet, but I am excited to see when it comes out and to be able to point myself out. Next up, I read Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I was not actually super impressed by this book, especially after reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm not sure which series came out first. I know they both came out around like 2012-ish, around that time, but I'm actually currently on the 4th book, so we'll talk about that later. Next up, I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I loved the aesthetic of this book. There's some books that I love because of the plot and the characters, and then there's books you just love for the aesthetics. This book didn't really have much of a plot other than Daisy. Is her name Daisy? Of course her name is Daisy. It's
literally the title of the book.
The selling point was really the style in which it was done and the interview style, which I didn't think I was gonna like, but I loved the aesthetics of the 1970s Hollywood. Next up, I read her other book, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It was also a kind of interview style, not as intensely as Daisy Jones and the Six, also taking place in Hollywood, which I guess I have a thing for. I enjoyed that book. I also read it on the plane as I was listening to Love of My Life on repeat by Harry Styles, because that is when that album first just came out, and it was a very emotional time. Next up, I read The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need, and that is by Joanna Martine Woolfolk. This was given to me by a friend as a gift. I love astrology. I'm super into astrology. Next up, so this is when I was doing background work on the set of Your Honor. It was set at a rodeo, so we were basically sitting in bleachers in the audience. We would be sitting there for hours and hours and hours. My butt literally bruised. Okay, but this is for another time. So while I was sitting in the bleachers doing absolutely nothing for hours on end, I took it upon myself to read the first 3 Harry Potter books. I read all 3 of those on the Libby app. If you don't know what Libby is, it's the app that I use to get books, ebooks from the Los Angeles Library. Then just because I was already in a Harry Potter kind of mood, I read the 4th and the 5th books, and then I stopped because I have read the 6th. Oh, I should say, I hadn't read any of those books before. I had read the 6th and the 7th. Before I saw The Half-Blood Prince in the last 2 movies, I wanted to read those books. Then moving on from that, oh my god. If I could give negative stars, I would. I'm so sorry. Suzanne Collins, I absolutely loved The Hunger Games, love the movies. But what the heck was this? The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes? No. Cut the cameras. Cut. I hated this book so much. It was the ending that tore me apart. Just left a bad taste in my mouth. Next up, I was hot girl walking like all summer. So I started really getting into a self-help kick. So these are the books by Tony Robbins that I listened to. Awaken the Giant Within and Giant Steps. I don't know what it is about him and giants. They were very motivational. Then I listened to I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I listened to that and it was also in her voice. She recorded it. That was really impactful because I was listening to her tell her own story. It's always intriguing learning about a famous person's background and what they've been through, but it was also very like heartbreaking because of what she's been through. Then I read The Night Tiger. This is by Yongzi Chu. It takes place in Malaysia and it follows these kids and they're all connected and there's a tiger that's like killing people and it's this like fantasy and there's a little love story in there too. It was good. It wasn't my favorite thing ever, but I thought it was really well done. I feel like that's my phrase for everything lately. It was really well done. I also listened to this book, The Ultimate Happiness Prescription, 7 Keys to Joy and Enlightenment by none other than Deepak Chopra. I could not tell you what the 7 keys were. Hello? Hey! Can I see that? Look what Misty brought me. I started to listen to another book by Deepak Chopra, but I was on the verge of falling asleep because his voice was just so soothing. I couldn't listen to it while I was on the road, so I stopped. That's when I started reading the second book, Crown of Midnight, in the Throne of Glass series. Did I like that book? What happened in that book? They're all a blur right now. And then while I was waiting for Libby to give me the 3rd and the 4th books because I placed a hold on those, I found that we had the Shadow and Bone series. They're on my shelf, so I was like, that's weird. So I read all 3 of those books. My mom and my sister and I watched the series on Netflix. Not as good as the book, but I loved the Six of Crows plot, which I haven't read yet. Then I read Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. She wrote it in a way that me not being Christian or having really any religion at all made me hopeful and made me actually believe in God when all my life I've never been taught a thing about God. I actually found the biggest glaring similarities in the way that God is presented in like faith and manifestation. It's all the same kind of idea. Like 10 out of 10 for that book, and especially reading it on Christmas or the day after just felt very wholesome. Then I read Heir of Fire. I actually raced to finish this book on New Year's Eve. I just wanted to finish that book real quick because that was my 30th book. I just wanted it to be an even number. That's what made my 30 books of 2022. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you read any of the books that I have read this year. Let me know if you have any really great recommendations. Stay tuned because my next video will probably be me explaining what basically my 2022 was like and where I'm going from here. That's it. Thank you so much. I love you guys and I'll see you next time.